A return to normality? Surely that's possible with so many vaccines and with so many people having recovered from COVID. An immunity passport could solve that. China's launched one, so has Israel and Chile. Other countries are reluctant. They say the passports could lull us into a false sense of security or divide society into the haves and have-nots.
There's a lot to take into account when it comes to a health passport or the digital version, which sounds practical, but not everyone's got a mobile phone. Plus, vaccinated people may still spread the disease, and not everyone can get the jab. Then there's the dilemma of data protection, identity theft, and international human rights. We'll talk to a lawyer about that in a moment. First, this report from DW's Tanya Kremer in Israel.
Since September, classes at this Tel Aviv yoga studio have been held online because of the pandemic. Now people can attend again in person, but only those who hold a green pass. The pass issued by Israel's Ministry of Health is given only to vaccinated people or those recovered from COVID-19.
So it's an amazing feeling. And everyone is vaccinated, so there's no fear. And it feels light. And parallelly, we are broadcasting the classes that are taking place here. We are broadcasting them on Zoom for people who still did not vaccinate.
Israel further eased restrictions after a prolonged lockdown. Malls, museums and stores have been opened for all. But gyms, pools, cultural and sports events will be made accessible to Green Pass holders only. Israel is one of the first countries trying to get life back to normal. Opening up has also opened a debate over a variety of legal and moral questions of limiting personal liberties, as there are some who are not rushing to get the vaccine.
We are limiting few people, and I believe this is balanced. We are not doing that for good. You will enjoy cultural life, you will enjoy sport, you will enjoy going to the gym, but in this time, on a temporary base, on a short term, we will let only people being vaccinated or recovered from corona to have the green pass.
It remains unclear whether international travel could also be linked to the green pass. For now, Israel's Ben Gurion airport will remain closed to keep virus variants at bay. Traveling is not yet on the mind of this group of long-term friends in Jerusalem. Aged between 84 and 95, they had to play their favorite Chinese board game Mahjong online for the past year. After their vaccinations, they feel safe again to meet.
I feel like at this point I am free. I mean, just to be able to talk to people is wonderful.
It's very nice to see everybody's okay and remained pretty healthy throughout the year, but very lonely. And it really is a wonderful feeling.
It's a first but cautious step back to some kind of normality.
Anna Badusky is an associate professor of law at the University of Exeter. Her research focuses on human rights, digital law and data protection. So are immunity passports in general a good or a bad idea? What do you reckon?
Well, digital passports in general, they may contribute to the long-term management of the pandemic, for example, by facilitating return to travel, to work, to large sport events. But at the same time, even though we can say that it's good news that governments and EU institutions are looking at considering these passports, at the same time, they should be clear that they pose a number of questions to data protection, privacy, and human rights, and that these questions should be taken into consideration. So it would be a good idea to have these digital health passports insofar as governments and EU leaders consider these issues and put forward a clear framework, clear guidelines and a roadmap for how we are going to implement these digital health passports in the coming months.
What are the concrete risks? I mean, how difficult could something like this make life for someone who isn't healthy, for example?
Well, let me give you an example that may illustrate that. So if we think about vaccine passports or COVID passports that would start to be required by authorities to access public spaces and private spaces, based on that, some people would be able to move freely, right? That would be the case of those that would have been vaccinated or those that would have tested negative for COVID. But on the other hand, we would have people that would not have access to these places. And if they cannot if they cannot have access to the vaccines and if they cannot have access to tests, they cannot prove their health status, and therefore they would have their freedoms and rights de facto restricted. So that could be the case, for example, of pregnant women for whom is not yet considered safe to get a vaccine. And now if we imagine that a woman that is pregnant that cannot be vaccinated cannot also afford to pay for a COVID test at an airport, for example, before traveling, well, in that case, she would be excluded from a variety of places, and that can be quite considerable, especially if we think about decades of progress on women's rights that we have achieved and that may be put into question in the case of application of this digital health passport in a way that is not compatible with their rights. So that's why we need to have a system in place, and we need governments to think about it. The deployment of these tests and these vaccinations that would inform the digital health passports in a clear way and have it thought through so that we don't incur these type of risks.
So, Anna, what should governments do to ensure that these passports are safe and non-discriminatory?
I believe there are three main points here. First, they should limit the purpose of using these tools, so that's called sunset clauses, right? So limiting that to the uses during the pandemic and not going beyond that. Then secondly, there are data protection and privacy considerations that should be taken into account and that should be built into the design of these tools. For example, even if people consent to have their data stored and collected and purposed for these uses, they should still be in the design. Data protection should still be in the design of these products. And thirdly, there is questions of accessibility and affordability of the COVID tests and the vaccines that should be available to all before any deployment of these tools.
Anna Baduski joining us from Exeter, England. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for more on vaccines, let's get you over to our science correspondent, Derek Williams. He's been looking at your questions that you've been sending us on our YouTube channel.
Once you get the vaccine, how long does it take to actually work?
This depends on a few different things, like which vaccine you receive, whether 1 or 2 doses are involved, how old you are, and other health factors. And when you say, how long does it take to work? I'd say you can't really put it that way, since an immune response isn't an on-off switch, but it's more of a sliding scale that grows steadily more reliable over the short to medium term. On the other hand, that vaccine-induced immune response might also tail off and grow weaker over the long term. We haven't been giving COVID-19 vaccines to people long enough to know how long-lasting their effects will be. It might turn out that you, for instance, need a booster shot somewhere down the road to remind your body that the disease is still out there and still a danger. All that said, there are some general guidelines that deserve a mention. The most obvious is that getting the first dose of a vaccine doesn't mean it's time to rip off your mask and party. All vaccines take at least a couple of weeks to bring the first measurable preventive effects. That's how long the immune system needs to begin mounting an effective response to a new pathogen. And before you receive the second dose from a 2-dose vaccine, you won't have the full-blown protection promised by trials. That's because the first dose puts the immune system on alert, while the second one kind of kicks it up a gear. So, for example, A new study has shown that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine was about 70% effective at preventing symptomatic infection starting 3 weeks after the first dose, which is when you're supposed to get the second one. That then boosts effectiveness to over 90% within the next couple of weeks. All in all, it therefore takes over a month to reach the full protection provided by that vaccine. Others take a similar amount of time to unfold their full potential.
Derek Williams there. And finally, some good news. Gibraltar says it's coming out of lockdown after the success of its vaccination campaign. COVID has killed 93 people in the British territory at the southern tip of Spain, but the rapid supply of vaccine doses from the UK has helped turn things around. Gibraltar now says it's on track to complete vaccination by the end of the month for both residents and commuters from Spain. Here's what some of them had to say.
I mean, I've been on the rock now a couple of months without having stepped foot in Spain, so that's a big part of our lives, just going across the border and, you know, visiting new cities each weekend and so on. So, yeah, it's the traveling I'm looking forward to most.
I still don't feel very comfortable going abroad because the fact is that in Spain not everybody has the vaccine.
I missed having coffee with friends. I was speaking to my fridge during lockdown, saying, "I'm sorry, but I have to open you again." Open the fridge, eat something, go back to the couch.
Can't have your cake and eat it too. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.